Hi, it's Joe here from Joe's Country Junction, and I am here today doing another episode of Sew with Joe with y'all. I am working on making this block. This is a block that will be featured in my upcoming quilt that I have that will be published with American Patchwork and Quilting. This will be in spring edition, probably next year at this time. And I know it's kind of crazy, but that's how far in advance I'm working on quilts for, if for magazine publication or for a book publication. It's typically about a year in advance, 9 months to a year, that I have to start working on a quilt if I want it to be published in an upcoming edition of a magazine. So you can see that my block has lots of 9 patches in. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 9 patches in a single block, and I need to make 25 blocks. I get a lot of questions asked to me like how I sew so quickly and how I get things done so quickly. So I just thought I would show you what I'm doing today. I'm doing some strip piecing, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about that as we go along. So to make the 9 patches, I need a strip set that goes dark, light, dark, and I also need a strip set that goes light, dark, light. And so I'll just do a Sew with Joe edition and just chat with you while I do this, maybe give you a tip along the way here or there, and we can talk about sewing and making 9 patches. So I have my iron here. I'm in my kitchen. I think you can even see my messy dishes over there, and I don't even care because everybody always asks me how I get so much done, and the reason is sometimes I have messy dishes. That's just the way it is. I prioritize sewing, and I don't always have dishes over there. To be perfectly honest, you maybe can find a dish or 2 over there quite regularly, but never as many as are over there now. We had a big family supper last night, and after the big family supper, I just was tired, and I decided that nope, I was not going to clean up the kitchen anymore. I was gonna go stitch, and that's perfectly okay. And I gave myself permission to just go stitch instead. And I hope that you do that for yourself occasionally too, that you just give yourself some time to stitch. I sewed these strip sets together earlier this week, and as I'm filming this is a Saturday, and my Saturdays are kind of precious. I know many of you work full-time jobs, and I have a full-time job as well. I do in-home childcare, and so I have kids all week, so I don't get to film videos, usually just only on the weekends. So when the weekends are here, I have to make the most of it, and sometimes making the most of it means leaving the dishes for, I'll probably do them this evening. As I am ironing, I am always pressing to the dark color. If I press to the white, what is going to happen is, what I mean when I press, okay, as I'm doing this, I want to press this to the dark. Because can you see how if I pressed it to the light, if I press this seam over and I pressed it towards the white, on this side, you can see that seam. And sometimes a little piece of red might unravel because you can see there's some raveling right here. And then when you go to machine quilt that, you might be able to see the red threads. You can see them right there. You might be able to see the red threads through the white fabric. So because of that, I always press towards the darker color. And another thing is if I press towards the darker color, once I come to match my pieces up, I can flip the seams one way or the other, and everything will nest together, and I won't have to do so much pinning. And that's another trick, to not have to pin a lot, to get quilts made a little bit faster. I'm just putzing along here getting these seams. I hate one of my least favorite things is ironing this kind when I have to flip the seam in. It just is take a little bit more time consuming. I sewed the strips together during the morning session of sewing this week. I typically get up about 20 minutes to a half an hour, probably closer to half an hour to 45 minutes actually, than I need to, but sometimes I hit the snooze button, so it only turns to be a little bit less time. But I always get in 20 minutes to a half an hour of time in the morning, and I sew. And so grabbing these and sewing these together in strip sets like this was something very easy for me to do in the morning. I very much enjoy starting my day with a little bit of quilting. I think it kind of sets my day to know that I already accomplished something. When I have so many projects going on and I have deadlines that I'm trying to reach, it's very nice to wake up, sew for a little bit, and know that I made just a small step towards reaching my deadline. I don't think I have enough strip sets sewn here, but I'll sew some more after I find out how many I have so far. You can probably hear Rosie scratching around. Rosie's my little beagle dog. She, if I'm here in the kitchen ironing, she is just not a content dog. She wants to get all the attention from me that she can. I do have a ironing station and cutting station upstairs in my sewing room, but I don't know, ever since we moved to this house, I've really preferred, if I have a lot of ironing and a lot of cutting, to come down here and do it on the kitchen island. And that probably sounds silly to many of you who don't have a sewing room, because you're probably thinking, well, of course I would stitch it, or I would do everything in my sewing room. And I do have a nice setup up there. I don't know, I just like it down here, and that's okay to just like it. So I'm done with my ironing portion of things. I noticed as I was ironing that this piece has a little cut in it, so I'm gonna come here and I'm just gonna take a rotary cutter and cut that off so that I don't later mistake it for a good piece. So I'm gonna unplug my iron, leave that back here to cool off. I'm gonna put my drink over here, slide my ironing board around, and then we'll get ready to cut. And I'll show you how I typically cut. I think the camera will work at this angle that I'm at. Okay, so I'm gonna move my pattern up, out of the way, kind of get situated. And then after we're done cutting, I'll probably take you all up to the sewing machine and we can sew our 9 patches. Okay. One thing I want to show you that I do is I do a notepad like this. You can see that at the top, I have it says how many that I need, and I need dark, light, dark combination. I need 200 of those. And for this combination, light, dark, light, I need 100 of those. So I keep a notepad here and I calculate and keep track of how many of each I have. So I'm gonna start out with the light, dark, light. And I'm just lining these up on my, here, I'll move these out of the way. So as I talk with my hands, you can see what I'm saying. I get made fun of all the time because I do talk with my hands quite a bit. So I am taking a line across the cutting mat and I am lining up my pieces along that line. But I stack up several and just do it like this. They're staggered, so one is a little bit further up the cutting board than the other ones, but I just stagger them like this. And I have a new sharp blade in my rotary cutter. Aren't you so proud of me? My daughter Kelly would be. She always gives me a hard time that she says I don't change my rotary cutter blade often enough. But if you've been following along with me, you know that I just deconstructed a lot of shirts. And anytime after I do a lot of shirts, I typically have to replace my blade. So I have everything lined up here. And so now I'm gonna square it up. And I have 5 layers that I am layered together. So I like to do a nice number that I can easily count by. So these were 2-inch strips, so I'm gonna make 2-inch segment cuts. So I'm lining up my ruler and just making a cut. And so we have 5 already. Woohoo! 5 on the way to 100. So this is going to be impossible for me to cut and count. So feel free to scream at the TV every so often when I at the screen every so often when I forget how many pieces I have. So I'm just going to lay them out like this. Normally I don't do that, but there's no way that I can talk, cut, and count all at the same time. I can maybe walk and chew gum, but cut, talk, and count, probably not. Especially if I'm talking to a camera and it is recording what I'm saying. I do better every time that I film a video, but it still does make me just a little bit nervous. In general, being I'm cutting 2-inch segments, I should be able to make 10 cuts across the piece, but I don't always have, well, that one slid a little bit. I don't always have pieces that are 20 inches wide or 21 inches wide because I normally cut a strip in half. Well, first I cut strips with the fabric and then I cut those strips in half when I sew them together to keep a little bit more variety in my quilt. But sometimes I end up with pieces that are only this big, so I can't always bank on there being 10. So I do count and calculate accordingly. Okay, so I always have a pile for leftover junk, and that's over there. So let's see how many we made in that cut. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we have 10 times 5, so we have 50. So I come over to my pad and I write 50 down. And so I'm 50 on my way to 100, and we're gonna get another set lined up here and ready to cut. Okay, I can see already that I'm gonna need to make more of these because I only have a few and they're odd pieces left. Being I use up some of these odd pieces like this, it's really hard to count to know how many pieces to cut or to sew together in advance. So now we're gonna test my math skills. There's 4. 8. 12. But now we're down and we only have 3 more. So to 12 we're adding 3. So we have 15. Make sure this is lined up. 18, 21, 24, and we're going to have a few more cuts. Okay, not that one. Now we're down to 2, so 26, 28, 30. So we're going to add 30 to my pile of those. So I'm going to record that down, and so now I have 80. And so I just record like that. Okay. I'm going to have to cut some more strips of that. I can see that already because I need 100 and I only have 80. So I'm going to make a note to myself to sew 2 more long strips so that when I get upstairs and to the sewing room, I'll sew 2 more long strips. Okay, so now I'm switching gears and I'm going to cut the dark, light, dark combination. So for this set, I need 200 pieces because I need to make 100 blocks, and every block has 2, every 9-patch block has 2 of these in it. I'm just laying these out. Getting ready to cut. That one's shorter. I'm going to leave that one aside so we can get all the big ones cut first. I'm going to layer up 5 again. That one looks shorter too. And so does that one. Yeah, this is a longer one. Yeah. I'm really excited about this quilt project. probably about, I would say 8 years ago. I used to design quilts on, I'm not gonna count them because I know I'll have 10 this time. I used to design quilts in the program Word that you probably already have as part of your Microsoft Office suite. And I would use the drawing tools in that program and I would design quilts. Well, I designed a quilt, but I don't know. I just felt like that the measurements weren't quite right because it's not like working in EQ. It's just not. And it's hard to set something on point, and the quilt that I'm doing is set on point. So I kept the design, and it was always like in my mind that I wanted to figure out how to make that quilt, but I just never did it. So last fall, I ended up buying EQ8. And when I bought EQ8, I was frustrated with myself all over again. I had talked to my daughter Kayla, and she came and she said, well, Mom, let's just learn how to do this together. And I don't know what it is, but Kayla is, let me think, is she 32? No, she's not. She's 30. Okay, she was born in 88, so she's 33. So she sat down at the computer with me, and she's just not afraid to click and push the buttons, and I am totally afraid to click and push the buttons. And she can look at an icon and guess what the icon means. I can look at an icon and I just have no clue what that icon means. So anyway, I would call myself, I'm computer literate and I do a fine job on the computer, but I just do not do well with learning anything new. I just never have enjoyed learning anything new. So Kayla came and she said to me, well, is there a quilt that you'd like to design on EQ? And I immediately went right to this quilt, and I pulled up and printed a sheet from my previous design work trying to figure it out. And I gave it to Kayla, and I said I would just be thrilled if I could figure out how to do this quilt in EQ, because the setting block that I have here, I don't think it's right. I just don't know quite how to manage that block. And Kayla sat down with me and did an awesome job. And she said to me, oh, look, Mom, here, we're gonna do this and this. And pretty soon Kayla was just clicking buttons and flipping blocks and doing all the things that I had no idea how to do. And in probably, I don't know, 15 minutes, she had my quilt redesigned, and she had some measurements for me, and I was able to see that making the quilt was possible. And I was just absolutely thrilled, and I still am. So about 2 weeks ago, I think I submitted it to American Patchwork and Quilting, and American Patchwork and Quilting took the quilt. And I am just very excited to be making it because it has like been on my quilt bucket list for a long time. And as I get down to the end here, I can see that some of these pieces I'm not going to be able to use. They just weren't quite big enough, or they have selvage on them. And that's okay. We'll just toss all those in there. Okay, so let's count how many here. We had 50 here. So then we go 55, 60, 65, 70, 75, 80, 85, 90, 95, 96, 97. So we have 97 pieces. So again, I'm going to record that, only I'm recording it on this side to see how many I need. And so I have 97 of the 200 that I need. And I can already see that I'm going to have to sew a few more of these strips too, but that's totally okay. So anyway, this quilt that I'm making has been in the works for a long time, or it's been in my mind, or it's been on my wish to make for a long time, and I can't tell you how excited I am to be making it. Okay, remember this is that piece that had that little cut. I'm gonna do a little trimming on that to see if I can make that work into a piece. And yeah, I will. Good. Throw the scraps over here. Okay, toss that one over here because I haven't counted that one yet. So this quilt has a lot of red in it. I'm a huge red fan. This time we only have 3 in the stack. So 3, 6, 9, 12. I'm actually so proud of my math skills. 18. I've got to say it out loud, otherwise I'm gonna forget though. 21, 24, 27, 30. Okay, we have this one, 31. And I'm gonna do one more right here. I think I can sneak out, yep, 32. So we're gonna close my rotary cutter blade, add 32 to 97, and we have 129. So right now I have 129 of these and 80 of those. It's enough that I can start making 9 patch blocks if I want to, and that's probably what I'm gonna do. But I know I have 129, so I'm going to need to make at least 8 more sets. So I wrote that down, so I know I need to make 8 sets of the one kind and 2 more sets of the other. And this is how I do it, especially like if you are making a Bonnie Hunter quilt and you're using scraps. This is exactly the way to do it, and to keep a little notepad like this so you can keep track of how many you need. Because when you're dealing with strip sets that have different amounts of slices in them or cuts in them, then it's really hard to sit at your sewing machine and guess how many strips it's going to take, especially because some strips might be this long and some strips might be this long and some strips might be this long that you're sewing together, so you don't always know. So this is what I do, is I sew a bunch together, I come down, I cut, I see how many I have, and then I know how many I need to go back and try to make. So there's that. And then another thing I wanted to quick say is, not so long ago on the blog, somebody asked me, how do you cut so many squares to make a quilt? Well, do you see, I never really cut squares because I had strip sets and then I subcut them into smaller segments that I need for the quilt. I'm gonna take you up to the sewing machine here in just a second, but before I do that, I wanna say something else. How I quilt is how I quilt. How you quilt is how you quilt. And so if you watch anything ever, then you can see that I'm doing this or I'm doing that, or somebody else tells you like to press this way or press that way. Try all of the methods that you hear about and then pick the method that works best for you. And that's what I've done in my life, and that's what has made quilting happy for me, is because I've tried the other methods, I've tried other things, and I've found the method that works for me best. I'm totally open to trying a different method if somebody comes up with something else. Like there's a big controversy. If you notice, when I was ironing, I didn't use any steam. A lot of people use steam. I don't use steam. I'm lazy. I don't want to keep the water that I need for my iron, and I don't want to have to go fill my iron all the time. So I'm lazy. B, I think it wears out your iron faster. Just the evaporation, condensation, all that stuff that's happening with the water wears out your iron faster. And C, I don't like to use steam because I feel like by putting steam on there, that sets this. And if there's not seam on there, I can still have a little give and pull. And if I have a little give and pull, then I can fudge a seam if I need to. Some people, when they sew totally towards perfection. They want everything they sew to be absolutely perfect. Hey, I'd like my stuff to be perfect too, but the reality of it is, it's not always perfect. So I plan for imperfection, and I plan to work around the imperfection. If you saw the quilts that I make close up, you would kind of wonder once in a while, oh, she didn't press her seam this way, or she didn't do this that way, or she didn't do this that way. There's a lot of things that I do that aren't completely and totally conventional according to the quilting police or to some people or what their preference is. And that's totally okay. I don't mind if, I prefer people to do things at their own way and their own method. So for me, I don't use steam, but if you listen to somebody else and somebody else does a sewing video, they're gonna probably tell you steam, steam, steam. And that's just not me. And I really encourage you to find you when you're sewing and find what works for you and find what method works for you. Try steam and see what you think of steam. Try no steam and see what you think of steam. Try starch, see what you think of starch. Try all of the things and then come back to find out what works best for you. And if none of them work for you, maybe you need to just come up with your own method, or watch more videos, or find something that does work for you, or just realize that that's just a stinky part of quilting, because sometimes there is just some stinky parts of quilting. I know, like, I am a person that I don't love to hand bind, so I've learned to machine bind, and that's totally okay. I think that too much pressure is put on people that you have to use this ruler, or you have to do this, or you have to do that, or you have to use steam. And really, there's no have-tos, there's want-tos, there's maybe need-tos, but I really want to encourage everybody to find your own method and find your own way that works for you. And like for me, some people would really enjoy sitting and sewing all these squares together. I'm not that girl. I want to strip piece as much as I can and then cut into segments like I am here with this. So let's head off to the sewing machine because we have some 9 patches to construct. So off we go. Okay, I'm at the machine now and I'm ready to start making our 9 patches. And if you recall, I have 200 9 patches to make. I love making 9 patches. 9 patches are one of my favorite blocks. So that doesn't make me a single bit sad. I'm really happy to be making them. As I told you, it's a Saturday, and my goal today is to try to sew together and make all 25 of those blocks, of these big blocks right here. So I want to make the 209 patches, and I want to get the blocks all sewn together. That's today's goal. If I got a little bit more done, that'd be great, but if I don't, that's okay too. I'm working on a couple different projects right now. You can see back here, I'm just making a charm, basically, quilt for Carl. My son Carl, he's our 4th kid, and he is buying a new home, and so he'll be moving in, and I thought that that would be a nice gift for him. In the past, I've made him Harry Potter quilts when he was little, and I made one with band music and one with dinosaurs for him, just simple quilts. And he told me the other day, he goes, "Mom, those are really worn out." And I said, "Well, I'll make you a new one." So I'm making that one out of shirt fabrics. Oh, you can see some hanging on the door, some strips hanging on the door over there too. So I'm working on that in between, and that's what I have in here as my leader block. And so I keep some of the blocks just sitting here with the sewing machine with me, and when I'm starting and finishing a project, I just run one of those in between. I've been sewing on that in the morning too. If you were listening to the earlier segment of the video, you saw that I said that I get up early in the morning, and I do, and so I am able to get a little bit of sewing done. So I have, I think 7 rows stitched together, and I did that just in my morning sewing sessions over this last week. And I think it really goes to show that you can quickly get something sewn together if you use good use of your time. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm putting these together like this, and then there's going to be one extra block of this, or one segment of this over here, and that's how I'm going to make my 9 patch. Well, being that I did careful ironing when I was downstairs, if I lay these together, you can see that the seams are gonna nest. So they're gonna go together like this. And when I do this, I can feel that the seams are butted up next to each other, and I have no need to pin because of that. And so a lot of people would sit and they would pin all of these together. And I don't do that. I just grab two pieces and I lay them right sides together, and I basically, I don't know, rub them, and I can feel that the seams are butted together, and I can just run them through the machine. I usually spend a lot of time on Saturday sewing. Typically, most of my Saturday all day long is sewing. And if it's not Saturday, it's Sunday. I usually get one full day every week to sew. And I pretty much need that in order to get the deadline projects done that I have committed to. So just this past week, I got my Christmas quilt sent out in the mail to American Patchwork. I'm super excited about that. It turned out totally awesome. I was very happy to see that come to a completion. That quilt was super quick to make. This one's going to take quite a bit longer. There's a lot more pieces and a lot more fussy work. Right now you're seeing the portion of the quilt that's relatively easy to make, and the alternate block when I'm doing this is a harder block to make. And that's part of the problem that I had when I was designing it in. And once I got it into EQ, it was much easier. This is kind of boring sewing for some, but I actually enjoy this repetitive motion. To me, the repetitive motion when I'm not filming a video is just relaxing. I think there's a certain amount of just repetitive work that allows you to think and process some of the things that happened in your day. For those of you who don't know, I am in Northeast Iowa. We have snow on the ground now, and it is mid-February, and that is very typical for us to still have snow on the ground in our area. And we are expecting more snow tomorrow. Last I looked, we were expecting 3 to 5 inches. And so that's not very exciting. I think we're all getting kind of sick of snow. I think for those of us that live in a colder climate, and I think really for everybody, with COVID, the outdoors became kind of a respite to all of us that were trying to stay indoors, and being able to go outdoors and do things was a great way to feel like you're still getting out and doing things. And with the snow and cold temperatures, it's just been harder. I know Calissa, that's our youngest daughter, she was over the other day and she said, we just so miss playing on the swing set. She goes, my boys I think have cabin fever. She said, all I really need to do is just, if I could just kick them outside. And today is a day she probably could kick them outside, but up until today, for the last like 2 weeks, we've had terrible cold weather that no, you can't kick the boys outside. So we just keep plugging along. I have neighbor boys. Can you hear them revving up their snowmobiles? We have a lot of snowmobilers in our area, and so the neighbors have 2 or 3 teenage boys, and they're always got some kind of mechanics going on over there. It's kind of fun to watch them. I have a door in my sewing room that is just directly here that I can see out of, and I enjoy having that door there. Eventually I'm going to get a deck made out there so that I could go out on the deck if I wanted to, but for now there's no deck. I very much enjoy sewing 9 patches. I think for me, 9 patches, polka dots, and red, the color red, are all things that I very much enjoy and make me happy. After I get done sewing these 9 patches together, I'll probably sew the rest of the strip sets together and then go down and iron them and come back to 9 patches again. That's my plan of the day anyway. And usually when I'm sewing, I typically listen to an audio or I recently, when I did my sewing room redo, I got a nice big TV put up, and that's directly behind where the camera is right now. And so I have a front-facing view to the television, and it's a bigger television, so I really love it. It's not huge, but it's a bigger television. And, I don't know, it's probably a 32-inch, but I previously just had a tiny TV that was only this big, and my aging eyes, even with glasses, I couldn't always see the selections to pick the channel on the TV, but now I can, and I really appreciate that. And I've really loved having the bigger TV up here. At first, I kind of thought that it was overkill, and then now I'm kind of like, nope, I love it. So I'm going to keep running a few of these through, and then I'm going to clip and put the other side on. I've been doing enough quilt submissions lately that my UFOs have kind of fallen aside, and look, there I ran out of thread. Okay, I'll clip that off. I'll get some thread changed. Keep my bobbins just right here in a drawer right below me, and so it's a quick and easy fix to get the bobbin changed. I wonder how many bobbins I'll go through today. I hope a lot. Wouldn't that be awesome? I'm going to put a little oil down here. My machine runs a little bit quieter if I keep it oiled. And it's just good for the machine, but I keep the Lori Holtz seam guide on here, and I use that. I'm not really using it a lot for the project I'm doing today, but I can just change my bobbin out just by lifting this a little bit like that. I've got several people ask questions about that. So gonna get this one through because I started it. And then I think I'm going to stop and I'm going to clip these apart so I can start seeing some 9 patches come together. As I was saying, though, I've started to I've submitted so many quilts lately that I've been kind of had to put some of my UFO sewing aside, and that makes me a little bit sad. But at the same token, when I've got an idea for a quilt submission and it fits the spot, that the time frame that I need. So for example, the last quilt I just submitted was a Christmas quilt, and my idea was for a Christmas quilt, but if I needed to submit a Christmas quilt, I needed to do it now, so I needed to make the quilt now. So that kind of changes things a little bit for me as far as working with their timeline in order to have a project done in a timely manner for them. Yeah, so my UFO quilting is kind of got set aside. It's not that I won't come back to it, and it's not that I'm still working on it, but it just isn't on the forefront burner right now. Okay, clip that one off, and then I'm going to add a piece to it. Little red 9 patch is what couldn't make a girl happy. I have to laugh. My friend Connie always teases me that red's my favorite color. And so, first little 9 patch, yahoo! A funny thing about the color red is I have a granddaughter, Georgia, and she is going to turn 2 in the beginning of March. And if you've watched my other Sew with Joe videos, she's the one that I made the baby quilt or the doll quilt for. Well, she is learning her colors, and she knows quite a few of them. But when Kelly was trying to teach her, my daughter Kelly was trying to teach her the color red, she kept saying, Grandma Joe's favorite color is red. Grandma Joe like red, red. Grandma Joe like red, red. So now if you hold something up to her and you ask her, what color is this? Instead of saying red, she says Joe. So red is Joe. I think that's just so funny. But red is my favorite color. It's long been my favorite color. I don't know. It's just a awesome color. And now, according to Georgia, the color is even named after me. So that's kind of fun. And off come the 9 patches. That's so fun to see them starting to come together. Continuing to sew these together. I'm grabbing one of these that have already been sewn together, and then I'm grabbing a segment from over here, and they're just going right sides together, and then I'm doing the exact same thing. I'm still butting those seams up and then sewing them. And again, I'm not pinning. If you are new to quilting, you might want to pin. I don't know. I haven't pinned for a long time, because ever since I started, when I very first started sewing, the quilting norm was to press seams open. And then it got to be that the norm was no longer to press seams open. The norm was to press to the dark side. And after you started pressing to the dark side, there's a better chance that the seams can butt up together. So then you don't necessarily need to pin. And so that's kind of one of the reasons why I don't press open as well, is because it just eliminates me having to pin. Oh, this one. I'm working on getting it better. Busy road by my house today. happening, but I am working my way towards the 209 patches that I need. I think there's a few things in quilting that are highly underrated, and that is 9 patches, 4 patches, and simple charm square quilts. I love all of them. Some people, if they were to sit down to make a quilt and they knew that they had to make 209 patches for the quilt, they would just cringe, but not me. I really, really love making it. We've had a pretty busy week here at my house. My whole family's doing a little bit better, but we kind of had ups and downs through the week. My grandson Jasper was hospitalized for pneumonia. He just turned 1 in January. He was hospitalized last Friday, Saturday, and he's doing better. Mom and Dad stayed home with him during the week, but he's doing much better now. But he's kind of at the needy stage. I think if you all have had kids, you know, if kids are sick, like more seriously sick like that, and then they get feeling better, that they're still on the needy side. They're used to being held for a lot. They're used to being rocked to sleep while they were sick, and they don't like revert back to the old habits that they've had before they were sick. So that's what Kayla and Spencer are dealing with right now, is trying to get Jasper to go back to his old self. So before he got sick, he was not having his pacifier anymore except for nap time. Well, then he got sick and they needed him to cooperate to do breathing treatments and things like that with his pneumonia. And so they were able to let him have his pacifier while he had his breathing treatments. And then now he's used to having his pacifier again. So they're back to trying to break him from his pacifier. So they've had a few ups and downs this week, but mostly ups because he's feeling better. All those other things are just minor as long as they're home and not in the hospital and feeling some better. We'd been having subtropic weather here in, not subtropic, sub-below weather here in Iowa for about 2 weeks, and it's just finally so nice. And with the sun shining today, I think we're all feeling a little bit of a taste of spring, and if I get a chance, I think I'm gonna go at least go walk Rosie around the block. I think both of us could use to get out of the house a little bit. I know I talked to you a little bit today about submitting quilts to magazines. I get a lot of questions about how I do that and how I started doing that. I started doing that, I don't know. It's getting to be quite a while ago when I first submitted a quilt to a magazine. I don't know, maybe 8 years ago. I'm just taking a wild stab at a guess. And our very first publication was with my daughter Kelly, and that was with Quilt Maker magazine. And we had it was great to do that the first time, and everybody asked, well, how did you do that? And if you look in the front of your magazine, there's usually a page before the table of contents, and in there it'll say the editor's name, and it sometimes will say, you know, like photography and all of this, and it'll give people's names or email addresses there. And so the very first time we submitted something, we just looked up the editor's email address from the actual magazine, and we submitted a design that way. So that was kind of exciting the first time we did that. And I have to say that even though we've had lots and lots of quilts in magazines, it's still exciting every time they say that they're taking a quilt. And it's still exciting when the magazine comes out to see if maybe our quilt made the cover or not, or how they did the layout of the quilt, or how they did the photography of our quilt. And I don't know, it's still exciting to me when I see our quilts in publication. And I think it's going to be super exciting to see this one because, like I said before, it was a bucket list quilt for me that I really, really wanted to make. I was reading through the comments on the blog, and I had to laugh because Donna, one of my blog readers who I've met, asked, how do we come up with names of quilts? And we really don't do that very well. One time we were going to, when Kelly and I were working on a project, I said to her, we were supposed to be going to town, and we had a few deadline things we had to do before we could go to town. And I said, well, we have to have a name for this quilt before we leave. And oftentimes we might name a quilt and then the publisher of the magazine, they change the name of the quilt. That happens probably, I would say, 90% of the time. And so I told Kelly, this quilt has got to have it. Well, we were going to one of the things we were planning on doing when we left and went to town, we were going to stop at this place called the Depot. And Kelly said, okay, I've got the perfect name for this quilt. And I said, well, what is it? And she said, Depot Delight. And that's the name we ended up going with because we are just terrible at naming quilts. For example, the working name of this quilt right now is Tulip Bed. Very, very unoriginal. During this week, I actually designed and submitted another quilt to American Patchwork and Quilting, and they accepted that one. So that will be coming next after this quilt is done. And I had to come up with a name for that. Jody, the editor of American Patchwork and Quilting, she messaged me and she goes, we need a working name for this quilt. And I'm like, I don't have a name for this quilt. I'm gonna sneeze, sorry. And the quilt that I'm making next is a quilt that is inspired by a vintage quilt that I bought at a little vintage shop just south of us called Maker's Market. And so she needed a name for the quilt, just a working name for the quilt. And I said, okay, let's call it Maker's Market. And it has nothing to do with the quilt, nothing at all. But that's how we come up with names. We really don't come up with names. It's just a complete and total fluke or coincidence that we even come up with a name at all. But I'm super excited about making that. And this week I've been working with Patty from Marcus Fabrics to get some fabric, and they're going to supply some of the fabric for that quilt. So I have been through all of the ones I initially put my first, that the first strip sets went together, and I'm going to cut those apart now and see how many we have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's 9, 10. So I've got one pile of 10. Okay, there's another pile of 10. So, wow, we're up to 20. Let's see how many more. Another pile of 10, I hope. Okay, there's another pile of 10. So, it looks like right now I have 31 done. So that's 31 on my way to 200. That's not too bad. I'm going to keep sewing here because we've got more to make and more to do. And I'm excited to keep working on them. I often do this now that I have my new island in my sewing room. I often like just make piles of 10 so I can quickly count and see how far along I am. I'm not going to iron these at this point. I'll probably save them for Monday. And on Monday during nap time, when I have my childcare kids here, I'll probably iron them then, because that's a great thing I can do to quietly work in the kitchen. And I don't need a sewing machine to do it, but I can still feel like I'm getting my project moved along. Usually on Saturdays when I can be up in my sewing room, I try to do all of the sewing that I can do. It just kind of works for me. And that's what I was talking about earlier, is when you're trying to figure out how to do things and how you want to do things, you always have to consider yourself and what works for you. Because I know a lot of people right now would be going, oh, I want to see those ironed. I want to see how they look. I want to see, you know, how my project's coming along. But for me, it's a smarter choice if I just leave them alone and I keep doing the sewing now, because I can do the ironing later in the week. But maybe not. We'll see. If I can get these blocks all sewn, or all the 9 patches sewn, I might quick iron them and keep going so that I can get them made into that big block. But the quilt has an alternate block too, and these are just the chain blocks. And the alternate block I'm pretty excited about too, so I might just switch and do the alternate block rather than finishing up these blocks. We'll see. We'll see how the mood strikes. Saturdays, quite often, as I'm sewing, I watch floss tube videos, because a lot of people film floss tube videos over the weekend, and I enjoy watching those while I sew. And being it Saturday, I'll probably do that versus listening to a audiobook. I have a nice set of headphones that I use, and if I'm at the quilt machine, that's when I listen to. If I'm at the long arm quilting a quilt, that's when I usually listen to the audiobooks. I do have to admit, part of me is working to hold myself back from switching and working over onto that quilt too, the one that's on my door for Carl. So far, I think I'm 4 or 5 weeks in a row of completing a quilt every week. And so I know I can't complete this quilt that I'm working on here, but I could probably complete that quilt if I sat down and worked on that instead. But that's the problem with wanting to sew your own stuff and having deadlines to sew too, is sometimes you end up fighting to see which one is going to get most of your attention. But right now, this quilt that I'm working on here, this one has a deadline of March 15th. So with that deadline looming, I feel like I better stick to this project. Sewing scrappy quilts. You can add all sorts of fabrics into them. This is an old VIP fabric, this top one right here, and this one's going to make its way into this quilt. I think it's probably a fabric from the 80s. A blog reader gifted it to me, and I kept it and threw it in this quilt. This piece right here, this is the backing to a quilt that I made. It's just the leftover backing. And so that's one of my favorite things about making a scrap quilt, is kind of reminiscing about where the pieces came from, or who gave them to me, or what quilt they might have been in before. Or here, and sometimes I come across this, like this top one up here is red grunge fabric, and that is left over from a project we did with Quilts and More. So I really enjoy the reminiscing part of quilting. I can't tell you how many times I've looked at a scrap quilt in a magazine and went, oh, I have that print. Oh, I have that print. Kelly and I used to do that a lot. I have a quilt on my bed, and it's a Pat's Spectrum, and I made it, and I can't tell you how many times Kelly and I have laid on my bed going, oh, I don't like this fabric, or I like this fabric, or do you remember when we got this fabric when we went to, and then some reminiscing always ensues. That's one of my favorite things. Someone suggested that I do the videos here live, and rather than tape them and put them on YouTube the way I have been, and that they thought they might enjoy them a little bit if the videos were live, and maybe like more of a Zoom format. And that prospect kind of scared me. Rosie has been very good in this video. She's laying over in her dog bed right over there, and she's napping. But I think in the past, some of you have watched some of my other videos, and either my kids call on the phone, or Rosie's acting up, or I have a coughing fit or something like that. And I just appreciate the ability to edit that stuff out. Although I really want to keep the videos live and accurate, let you see a little taste of my life. I don't think you want to be interrupted by my kids calling, or my dog barking or wanting to go outside. So I think for now I'll just probably keep the videos like this in this format, which I think that's okay too. So you can see in a short amount of time, I've made quite a few blocks already. I'm really excited about that, and you can see that if I keep some, I can probably get the rest of the blocks made yet today. If I'm not filming, I can get a lot more blocks done. I don't, I can sew a little faster if I'm not talking. So I'm gonna stop for a second and take these apart again and go back to making 9 patches versus just sewing the first 2 segments together. Oops. I'm gonna have quite a few more together. That's awesome. When I first designed the quilt, and then I printed off, after you design something in EQ, you can push a button and EQ will tell you what size you need to cut your pieces and how many pieces you need to cut of what. And it's actually pretty good. It doesn't, if you have a specialty block, it does not show you cutting very well for that. The alternate block that goes with this, I'm not being able to rely on their cutting instructions very much at all. But for a straightforward block like this, it does really do a good job with telling you what you need for cutting. Like mine are based on 2-inch squares, but what they do is they tell me I need to cut 2-inch squares, but I've already told you that I'm doing a strip piecing method instead. So when I'm doing that, I don't exactly go by this, but in general I can or do, and I can see that I need 2-inch squares, and I can see that this center square in here, I can see that that's going to have to be 3.5 inches. So I really appreciate having that. When I was designing in Word, I didn't have that. And this has been a real confidence booster. So when I was doing the quilt and I counted out and I just needed 25 of these blocks, I thought, oh, 25 blocks, I can do that in no time. Well, then when I added up that I needed 4 9 patches for every block, and 4 times 9 or 4 times 25, I can't even, 4 times 25 is 100. When I realized I needed that many 9 patches, then I went, oops. So, oh, I counted wrong. I only need 100, so I already have 30 done towards 100, so I'm doing awesome. Yeah. So maybe I will get these blocks completely done today. We'll see. I have no idea. One of the last times I did a video, I had told you that I was going to, oh, I'm still cutting. I'm not even paying attention to what I'm doing. I had told you that I was going to just add 1 block at a time to the project that I was making. At that time, I was making my Old World Fantasy quilt. And when I got done filming, I looked at the project and I thought, okay, if you would just sit here and apply yourself to this project, how long would this project actually take you to do? And then I realized that it wasn't going to take me that long. And I just sat down, even though I had spent the whole video telling you that I was going to only add 1 block at a time, or 1 row to the quilt at a time. I sat down and I finished the entire quilt top. So don't trust what I tell you. As far as what I'm going to be doing next, I don't know what I'm going to be doing with the rest of my day. We'll just see where the day takes me. I do know that I shouldn't have a lot of interruptions from my kids today because they're gone or doing something, busy with friends. So I don't even expect a lot of phone calls. So I really do want to make the most of my sewing time. So we'll see where it takes me. Who knows? I know one thing for sure, I will not have this into a quilt top by the end of the day. But if I decided to, I maybe could have it all together by Sunday night. We'll see. I do have to tell you, it's on an on point, and the setting is on point for this. And I hate on point settings. So we'll see what happens with that. Sometimes I do a terrible job at twisting blocks when I have to put something on point, but I can power through it. One thing that I don't have in my sewing room is a design board or a design wall. A lot of people have a design wall, and I think that would be nice, but I have a lot of windows and doors. So my sewing room is 14 by 20, and I have 3 doors and 2 windows in that space. So that really takes up a lot of the area that I might otherwise be able to have a design wall in. So that's one of the reasons I don't have one. And in general, I'm okay with that. It's just that this quilt, like when I'm setting something on point where the blocks could easily twist, and the blocks have to be a certain oriented a certain way, that really makes me wish a little bit for a design wall. But yeah. I think I'm going to probably stop the video here. And I think I'm going to go eat some lunch. That sounds really good right now. It's getting towards noon, and my tummy's starting to grumble. So I don't know, like I said, I don't know what I'm going to do for the rest of the day, but I know I for sure am going to keep sewing until I have nothing left of these 2 piles. I'll see how many 9 patches I get made, and I'm pretty sure I'll continue on and make the rest of the 9 patches, but then I might move over and start the other alternate block because I have a lot of sewing that needs to be done for that block too. But so far I'm super excited about this quilt. I can't wait to give you a bigger sneak peek of it at some point. Hopefully in the next week or two, I'll maybe show it to you at the quilt machine, or I don't know. We'll see what happens. For now, that's all I have for you for this edition of Sew with Jo, and thanks for joining me, and don't forget to like or subscribe, and if you leave a comment, that's awesome. That really helps me know if you like the content or if it's something that I should keep doing or not, because I really do follow and listen to the comments that you leave on the blog, so, or leave here too. So if you want to see what I'm doing day to day, just check out my blog, joescountryjunction.com. See you later. Bye.